Today on Little Wars TV, we complete the trilogy of battles that made 1066 the most iconic date in English military history. We are wargaming Hastings, the battle that immortalized William, Duke of Normandy, as William the Conqueror.
And we're not just playing a tabletop war game. We're here on location to walk the ground in East Sussex, in the southern coast of England.
Last week, we took a guided tour of the battlefield and brought you along for the journey. This week, we'll put our battlefield exploration to good use and build a custom replica of Hastings in 6mm scale to fight a fantastic, pocket-sized war game. The kind you can put together with your own friends on a very reasonable budget.
In fact, we are giving you the rules and the scenarios used in our 1066 series for free. 2 weeks ago, we used these rules to refight Fulford Gate and Stamford Bridge. But now it's time for the final showdown at Hastings. Can the Normans shatter Saxon rule of England once more?
Find out next on Little Wars TV.
Josh, I think we clearly established in our last episode on Stamford Bridge that it's impossible to understand Hastings without understanding the two battles that the Saxons had to fight just a month before.
Agreed, but I still have some questions about the Battle of Hastings.
The biggest mystery of all, at least to me, is what the hell Harold Godwinson was thinking by fighting here at all. He's just won a smashing victory at Stamford Bridge thanks to a grueling forced march. And now he turns his army around and races back another 250 miles to the southern coast to face a fresh, well-rested Norman army?
Why not wait around London, rest your troops, maybe even gather some more troops before rushing off to Hastings?
I'm Kelly DeVries. I'm a professor of history at Loyola University in Maryland and a historical consultant at the Royal Armouries in the UK. We don't know what William's thinking. We certainly don't know what Harold's thinking on the other side. I mean, why even go that far down? I mean, he's just been all the way up. He's got to know his numbers are smaller. He can't call the Northumbrian and Mercian militias. They've been defeated at the Battle of Fulford Gate. And yet he comes down and says, okay, I'm going to do battle. And he moves outside of London. Well, one of the things we have to recognize is the Anglo-Saxon town is well known, and it's outside the London walls, which are still Roman. So there's no fortifications in London to be had. The Roman ruins have been used as recycling to build the houses and the buildings of the town of London. So there's no protections offered him there. And if he does bring William to London, he's put his population base, both his tax base and his agricultural base at risk, let alone all those fertile lands in the south, which would have been absolutely denuded of peasants and farmers. So Harold's got to take the battle to William. But I also think that success has really emboldened Harold. He just kicked the butt of big army up in the north, the Norwegians. All ideas are the Norwegians were every bit as good as the Normans.
Josh, in that answer to your question, Professor DeVries mentioned something that's a bit of a mystery to me. William is the Duke of Normandy, and by 1066, the most powerful noble in France. What the hell is he doing, risking his position with a highly dangerous crossing into England? There are major logistical and political liabilities here, not to mention the very real possibility of defeat on the battlefield with no easy retreat home. This all seems like an insane leap of faith for William to take, doesn't it?
I'm getting older. I know I'm getting older because I start to think that economics is more important than ideology or expansionism. We know England was rich with resources. I mean, the Romans go there for the tin, and they take as much tin as they can. By this time, we're getting some change, but the agriculture is fairly rich in England. And I think that may be driving William, along with this notion of expansionism, the notion that he had been awarded the kingship. But is it just the idea that he can be king? Is it this notion of expansionism? Does he want to rule? I'm not sure. And nobody has been able to figure it out. William of Poitiers, his closest advisor, the chaplain, doesn't tell us. There's, of course, nothing that has a little thought bubble in the Bayeux Tapestry up above. It's like, oh, geez, I'm going to spread out. There's none of that. So I don't know, but I think part of it must be the natural resources. I really would like to have sat down with William and said, hey, dude, this is big. I mean, what you're doing here with moving these forces over and everything else, do people know that there isn't like a fountain of youth on the other side or something reason why you want to take over this island?
We may never know what compelled William to risk everything invading England, but in late October 1066, the stage is set here, on this field, for the showdown.
Well, sort of. At least somewhere in this field.
When we're looking at pre-modern battles, we always have to look at what access there is to the battlefield first. And if you go to Hastings, you see what the Battlefield's Trust and the English Heritage have done in setting up the battle. You'd think that William's riding up this hill that's full of grass. What they don't tell you is that even during the winter, that part is all covered in water, and it would have been all covered in water at that time too. So that's not where he came. He had to come up the Roman road. Now, whether the battle is fought across that ridge, as the English Heritage would have us believe, so the Norman horses, for some reason, are coming out of the bog, which doesn't seem likely, or whether, as I and have written, and Mike Livingston and I, who wrote a book on Hastings, we kind of feel that it was probably on the hill, but across the Roman road. So William is coming up and essentially using the Roman road to come into them. And if you go to the abbey and you look not down at where the bog would have been, but look sideways, you can see the Roman road coming out of Hastings. It's exactly the road that William would have used to march his army on. If we do establish that the Battle Abbey is a representation of where the battle has to be fought, it's in a pretty good place for a battlefield. Now, I've got to remember that Harold's gotten there first. Harold Godwinson has set his troops up first. He sets them up in an advantageous place. And Williams has no point to get around him unless he goes back to Hastings and follows the coastal roads. He's got to go quite a bit farther back if he doesn't want to do the battle there. Of course, William wants to battle. There's no question he wants to do a battle at this point. His men have been there. They're rested. Harold's are not. He knows that. So William is ready to fight. And so the terrain is pretty much what it represents, except for there isn't as much water in the bog at the bottom of the hill that there would have been, just simply because of irrigation and other waters that are taking. Although if you go in winter, you wouldn't know that, because you can walk right across that. You better use your wellies. You got to get up there.
If you'd like to check out a full walking tour of the battlefield here at Hastings, remember to check out last week's video. But Josh, I think it's time we get to the wargame.
Yeah, we need to head back to the club and set up the action.
But Harold Godwinson's death in 1066 doesn't mean our battle will play out the same way. In fact, I can just about guarantee that it will not.
We have so much more to say about Hastings and the history of this iconic moment in military history.
It's interesting to say that we almost know nothing about medieval tactics in the middle of the 11th century. What we do know is what, in fact, we get from the Battle of Hastings as far as the cavalry is concerned.
Professor DeVries is a leading expert on medieval warfare, and in a future video, we'll talk to him about the nuts and bolts of how armies in this era fought. How did the Normans come to rely on cavalry when the Saxons and the Danes did not?
What role did archers play in these battles? And why is every soldier in the Bayeux Tapestry wearing chainmail?
And how did command and control function in Norman or Saxon armies?
Professor DeVries covers those questions in detail for those of you who want to delve deeper.
Yes, Josh, but I suspect that most of our viewers are ready to delve into something different. Our miniature wargame for the Battle of Hastings. We took our battlefield experience home to the club and constructed a series of 2x2 pocket-sized battle boards to recreate all three of the battles from 1066.
By the grace of God, I have been victorious against the Vikings at Stamford Bridge. And now, the worst threat that has come to Saxon England in my reign, the bastard William.
Hi everyone, I'm Zach and I'm playing William the would-be conqueror of England. I'm going to face down Tony, Harold Godwinson at the Battle of Hastings. And my plan is, with 12 turns on the clock, to go the more historical approach and form up my line skirmish against him with my superior missile troops while my knights cast javelins and try to wear him down. And then, a decisive charge. So today what we're doing is we're actually using Raven Feast, a skirmish Dark Ages game, to play mass battles, which just shows like the versatility you can get with the simple rule system. A few tweaks here and there, maybe some rules to accommodate for like mass or large units, and you can really make any battle you want out of a simple rules set. And today we're each stand is worth 300 men, so that's, Greg was kind enough to make some cool like 6mm bases, but you could do this at home even with single figures on bases, or put like 3 or 4 guys on a like 40 by 40mm stand and say that's a full unit, and just kind of upscale all of the unit sizes, figuratively like that. And then you want to change the ground scale a little bit. So this we're using, instead of inches, we're using half inches. You could also use centimeters. Or if you are going bigger, you could, double the scale, up, have it down. There's really a lot of versatility to be had here, which is neat.
As our pocket-sized version of Hastings in 6mm scale gets underway, we should remind you that this is the third and final chapter in a linked series of battles from 1066. And in our last battle, Stamford Bridge, Tony won a decisive victory, but at a considerable cost. And its cost, whose bill is coming due here at Hastings.
Of note in the impending battle, because I was rash and trying to quickly reduce the threat of the Vikings, my mount at Huskarl suffered casualties which will sadly impact the troops available to me against the threat from the bastard William.
2 missing bases of Huskarls may not sound like a big deal, but the total Saxon army size for this scenario is only 22 units, most of which are feared militia. To try to keep Zach off balance early in the battle, Tony has secretly deployed a few bases of skirmishers and light troops down in the marshy ground below Senlac Hill. This is a what-if deployment option our scenario allows for the Saxon player. These ambushing troops are held off-table until the ambush is sprung. The opening turns see the Norman army shake out into battle line, with a cavalry detachment racing ahead on the right flank to pepper the Saxons with javelins. To slow the Normans down on the other flank, Tony decides to spring his ambush early instead of waiting for the enemy to pass by.
Yeah, where are your sneaky archers?
Right here.
Nice. When they reveal, my knight will throw javelins at that guy. Range is 4, so... and nothing. Good. So, even across, and then these last 2 on the last guy.
Okay.
So first one, miss, miss, and then the last 2.
Miss and miss.
So that's representing what the Normans riding forward, throwing a javelin, riding back.
All right. Down here we have combat.
Zach cannot send his cavalry into the marsh, and instead detaches some heavy infantry to march down into the wet ground and neutralize Tony's ambush formation. Meanwhile, the Norman cavalry continues forward to hurl javelins at the Saxon shield wall. The Normans have a major advantage at Hastings in missile troops, not just the spear-throwing knights, but also with archers and crossbows.
2 javelins, both aimed at that end guy. 2 hits.
Whoa.
2 saves.
Nice, nice. Archers, that guy, same as before.
Miss and a miss.
Yep. Crossbowmen, again, that guy and that guy.
Miss.
1 hit, they're shooting 3. Shorter range but 3, but you have a good save.
Good.
Nice. And then stupid javelins. Picturing this is like the knights galloping past that wing, just whipping javelins, and 2 hits.
Whoa. 2 saves.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Steady. All right, and down here.
Yeah, just shields getting hammered. That's great.
The shield wall holds firm with Norman arrows and spears raining down upon them. And down in the marshy ground, the Saxons are more than holding their own. Zach discovers he isn't just facing some rabble archers. The king's younger brother, Leofwine Godwinson, is commanding the ambush force and hacking down Norman infantry with a fury.
And then here I have Leofwine Godwinson versus, who are those guys? Those are Norman infantry.
Yep.
Go ahead and roll.
Okay. Miss. And second one in the flank is also miss.
All right. Leofwine is melee 4. He'll hit.
Okay, and save.
Nope.
Failed to save. Okay, so yeah, they just diced up 1,000 Norman
Dude,
infantry.
that little tiny archer unit led by love.
And we're on to turn 6. Initiative.
Okay.
Bloody. Reroll.
You go first.
Great.
Zach orders Bishop Odo, William's brother, to head down into the marsh and deal with these meddlesome Saxons, while the Duke personally leads his knights to crash into the extreme flank of the shield wall. By focusing on the Saxon flanks, Zach has smartly left the center open to leave clear fields of fire for his archers and crossbows, daring Tony to break his shield wall to drive off the missile-armed attackers. But Tony refuses the bait, choosing instead to endure the withering fire and suffer the losses. With each Saxon stand killed, the shield wall shrinks just a little bit shorter. But the biggest loss of the morning won't come on Sandlac Hill. It's down in the marshes below, where Bishop Odo meets Leofwine Godwinson.
We hit.
Hit. And Bishop Odo goes down.
The loss of Bishop Odo isn't just a personal blow for Duke William and a major rewrite of history, it also represents a loss of command and control. Leaders and heroes in Big Battle Ravenfeast exert a command radius equal to their morale rating, usually 4 or 5 inches. Units outside the radius of a commander only move at half speed. So this now means Zach has less ability to control his already long line of troops with 2 commanders instead of 3.
So as we advance, some Saxon archers, led by Leofwine Godwinson, appeared on the edge of the swamp. Bishop Odo led some Norman infantry down to see them off, but unfortunately fell to some archers, his armor amongst nearly 600 Norman warriors, bogging them down, rendering them battle ineffective casualties in that swamp. Meanwhile, my crossbows have continued to punch holes in the fjord, arranged in a shallow, unlike historical, shield wall, only a single unit deep. And William, leading his knights, showering the Saxon flanks with skirmish attacks and javelins, has now charged and crushed the fjord on the Saxon right. He has not yet heard the news of fallen Odo. We'll see how this plays out.
Up until this last turn, I thought my plan was working pretty good. Making him come to me. I put on a little sideshow, withdrew off a significant portion of his forces. So hopefully I can contain his cavalry, which is in my front, or rather on my right flank, long enough to run the clock out on him.
Tony's strategy to run out the clock and survive until dusk is no surprise to Zach. He can see the Saxon shield wall tightening up, giving ground, and retreating down the rear slope of Sandlac Hill. But to press ahead with a final assault, Zach has to solve his new command and control problem.
Okay, so with the death of Odo, suddenly my center infantry were out of command. So, and command is, the morale in inches. I need to get Eustace II here. I've been moving him over to try and get these infantry to move quicker, because when you're out of command, your movement's halved.
Shifting Count Eustace into the center brings the Norman heavy infantry back under command and allows Zach to reorganize and attack. All the while, Duke William continues to personally lead most of the Norman cavalry into repeated attacks on the Saxon flank, hammering them at every opportunity. He's looking for any possible opening into the shield wall.
Knights. 3 hits, 1 death worthy of the song.
Death worthy of the song. We save.
Okay.
2 more. We're going to save 1, miss 1, and Girth is killed.
Ooh, the first Godwin brother has gone down.
It's tough. Saxon Huskarls are scary. They're really scary.
One of Harold Godwinson's younger brothers is killed, and suddenly the Saxon right flank is looking very vulnerable. Harold's other brother, Leofwine, is now far behind the Norman lines, emerging from the marshy thicket to rejoin the main battle on Senlac Hill.
Okay, shooting.
You have lots of it.
2 archers at Leofwine. Miss, miss. 2 crossbows at Leofwine. 2 hits.
Oh, swing and a miss. He's killed.
Shot. Yes. Falling back. Shields up. Okay. Whoo!
And at this point, all right,
Okay.
we are last turn.
All right.
I am 1 stand away from my break point.
With the October sun now low on the horizon, our Battle of Hastings has reached its climax. Both of Harold's brothers lie dead, and his army teeters on the brink of collapse. The surviving Saxon troops have fallen back as far as they can, now huddled in the thicket of Malfoss, a wooded ravine behind Senlac Hill. The situation is dire, but Zach's mounted troops cannot descend into the rough ground. He'll need to rely on missile fire and his infantry to finish off the Saxons before the day ends.
5, I miss.
And 1 we hit.
And I save. Next, Norman
one.
infantry.
Though he is personally wounded, somehow, against all odds, Harold Godwinson survives, and the remnants of his shield wall fend off the final, desperate Norman attacks.
That's that. That is the end of the turn.
There we are.
Wow. You're telling me you held on by 1 base?
1 base.
There's just simply, once they're back on that swamp, nothing I could do.
Crap, man. That was legendary.
Good game. So what was your breaking point?
16. I've lost 15.
Okay.
That's what I said. I'm like 1 base.
Because at this point, you're driven into the swamp, and Huskarls once they're in that swamp, my infantry just can't do.
Zach, as always, a pleasure. Good to see you again.
That was
good
tense.
to match wits.
That was very intense.
It was indeed. I stuck to my basic strategy. I kept modifying my plan over and over and over again. You were just relentless in pushing every opportunity there.
Well, I'd stalled in the beginning to bring up my vans and get the battles into line, and I knew that I had the missile superiority in like the cavalry speed, which I'm not used to in Raven Feast. But I wanted to use it to kind of plink away, opening some holes in your line. As I did fall for your trap in the swamp, and somehow 1,000 Normans disappeared into that swamp with Bishop Odo. But I rectified it. Just said ran away.
That attacking the ambush party as you did was the only thing that saved me here. Had you committed less force or just left them, I'd have been wiped off the board.
The coming up there and trying to roll your flank with the cavalry, that was starting to be effective against that fear that you had there, but I was always aware of those Saxon Huskarls. Tough, high armor. If you're in shield wall, you can't be beat. And that's what we saw there in the end, is I brought the Norman infantry up. In mass battles, there's no supporting attacks. But even in shield wall, I almost don't stand a chance against that. And it came down to that final melee as the knights are standing helpless at the edge of the swamp.
It was right up until the last moment that was just a great game because it came down to the wire.
Yeah, didn't know which way it was going to go, but
Thank you again, sir.
Yeah. My lord, for now, the crown of England is yours, Will Scotland.
Bend the knee! It's official.
Lord Morano!
This is pretty cool.
Greg, I feel like our journey into the crisis of 1066 has come to an end. And what better place to bring it to an end than here at Battle Abbey, where the last Saxon king fell?
Well, supposedly. And I think Professor DeVries might dispute whether Hastings was really the end at all.
The idea that somehow a battle is decisive, that's a modern concept. In fact, modern, it's a Napoleonic concept, really. And yet, how many of his battles were decisive? Well, Waterloo. That was about it. Everybody has their Waterloo, right? Nobody has their Hastings. William doesn't actually win the kingdom. He has killed the king. He has killed the king's brothers, so all likely heirs. The queen is still alive, but she's not going to produce. She's too old at this point, and she will go off to a nunnery. In fact, Harold's mother is still alive at this period, and she goes off to a nunnery. So there's, there is really nobody left except for all the people who don't want to be Norman. The two, Northumbria and Mercia, are not taken. That'll take over a couple of years, and then there are other rebel lords. William dies, and I don't think he's still secured all of the kingdom. Wales is still on the outside. Scotland's still there. So the whole island isn't gone. How secure the kingdom is. William Rufus and Henry I do have a fairly good time of it, but then breaks out the Civil War again. So England seems never to be pacified completely. Hastings is as decisive a battle as you can get in the Middle Ages, which means not exactly decisive.
Thanks for joining us at Hastings, guys. I hope you enjoyed our tour and our trilogy of war games.